That's fine.
Yeah.
This is special topics test 2, and the launch pad for this is a feature article I did on timing belts. And so, when is the best time to replace your timing belt? Anybody know?
Whenever it's convenient, or whenever you need to.
Do you wait till it jumps time?
No.
Why not?
Because it might destroy the heads, might just damage the engine.
You also need to consider the fact that if the timing belt has got a change interval, like on some vehicles, you know, the lady that lives in our neighborhood, that's a neighbor of ours, that drives a Mitsubishi Galant, and there's interference engines and there's non-interference engines. If that Ford Escort happens to spin out of time because the timing belt strips, it won't hurt the engine. The one on the this Toyota Camry out here that we got on its engine stand, it won't hurt the engine. Mitsubishi Galant, pistons hit the valves hit the pistons. On the Kias, not only do the valves hit the pistons, it snaps the heads off the valves, and they just bounce around in there and destroy the block and cylinder head and everything else. We're talking engine time, you know. There was a girl in a little SUV, and I don't remember what the SUV was. I don't remember but one day she was in here, and she had us doing something else, and we fixed whatever else it was. And I said, I hear the timing belt slapping the cover. Have you ever had a timing belt put on this? And she says, well, no. And I says, well, it's past the miles when the book says you're supposed to replace the timing belt. You need to put one on it. And she says, okay. So I got a belt with like $40. I said, we can put it on tomorrow if you'll bring the truck. Well, she just never brought it back. And about 2 months later, she told me this later, she's turning in at Walmart, and it jumps time, and by the time the hook got through taking it to the shop and they got it fixed, it was a $1,500 repair bill. See, it would have been $40 if we'd have, see what I'm saying? But anyway, so the best thing to do with replacing a timing belt is you decide when it's going to be replaced. Now, some engines have got timing chains, and they don't usually give any trouble, you know. On some of the Nissan Altimas and stuff, the timing chain can stretch a little bit and get the cam and the crank a little out of sync, and you have to put a timing chain on those. That comes from the Nissan factory people. That's what they say. But unless they got a rotary engine, the power producing engine that drives torque to transmission is outfitted with pistons and valves and a spinning shaft with indexed egg-shaped lobes, you know, that open the valves. And it's big. An engine is basically a big breathing machine. And actually, every time the pistons go down with the intake valve open, the low pressure that's created, you know, whenever you drink water or something through a straw, you make the inside of your mouth little, and then you seal your lips around that straw, and then you make the inside of your mouth big, and the atmospheric pressure pushes the liquid into your mouth, right? That's the way that works. You don't think about that. You think I'm sucking it through this straw. But basically, you're just creating low pressure in your mouth, and the atmospheric pressure, and now here's pushing on the top of that fluid, and that's how you get it in there. But the spark delivery is a crucially timed thing, and the spark originally was controlled mechanically, like with your distributors and stuff like that. T-model vintage cars had a lever on the steering wheel for that. You ever seen these steering wheels on these old T-model vintage cars that have a lever right in the middle of the wheel? You know, that is actually timing retard. You retard the timing to start the engine because it makes it easier to start, and then you advance it to give you the power you need going down the road. And this guy had a 20-something Model A pickup over there that he was doing some carburetor work on, believe it or not, at the Lincoln Mercury place when I was over there in '84 or whatever it was I was over. And he couldn't get the thing to start, and it was kicking back and all that. And I said, Bobby, you're going to break your arm. They said, watch this. So we go there and pull the timing advance back. Just bring it back up. Well, he wasn't aware. And I don't even remember how I knew it, but I had been told that or something. I can't remember, but it was. So anyway, cam timing has remained fairly consistent for almost 100 years. Of course, it's been changing lately. But there's a lot of ways to drive a camshaft. All of them are pretty much have one thing in common. The camshafts always spin at half of crankshaft speed. Camshafts always spin at half of crankshaft speed. And camshafts aren't easy to spin. They're operating these heavy spring-loaded valves. Have you ever turned a camshaft with a ratchet or a wrench or anything?
Yeah.
When it was opening the valves, what does it do?
pretty hard to do.
It goes boom, boom, boom. It's hard and then easy, hard and then easy. And so what they got to do is they got to come up with a way so that whenever all this hard and easy stuff's going on, the engine's running, we have something that's not going to make noise. If you've got a gear-driven camshaft, well, what I'm saying, it's actually got gears that are driving it. You might even notice they would put phenolic teeth or some composite material on the cam gear, and the crank gear would be something else. And what they would do there is they would have it fixed so that when it did make this hammering that it was making, you wouldn't hear it because it was that composite material. The problem with that is the composite material will bust off of there, and then you get out of time. So Toyota came up with something really brilliant on their little Camry engines and all that kind of stuff. You got to hand Toyota. Toyota does some pretty slick engineering. They put two gears together that make one gear. In other words, they kind of hollow out the inside of two half gears. They put them together and put a spring in between them, so that the spring is always trying to do this all the time. I'll say, so when you pull that spring around so that those teeth are lined up, and you put a bolt in there so that it can't release, and you put it in time, it's got a timing belt on this Camry engine out there, but under the valve cover, there's a couple of gears that drive the two, because it's dual overhead cam, but only one gear shows up outside. The other camshaft is driven by a gear inside. And so they got these scissor gears, that's what they call them. And so when you're taking that camshaft out, you're supposed to run a bolt through there to keep that thing from unloading. If it does unload, it ain't a big deal. You just get some channel locks and pull it back and put a bolt in it. And I can show you that out here on this engine. It's fairly easy to show you. And I'm probably going to let you guys handle timing belts and stuff as a part of your engine performance training and everything. This timing belts on this Toyota, we'll let you pull the cover off and do the timing belts on that, so you'll be familiar with it. But the long and the short of it is, these teeth are always pinching the other gear that mesh with them. Now in Volkswagen Bugs, they had like 11 different angled grinds on your camshaft. The Volkswagen Bug engine with the horizontal opposed pistons, the old air-cooled Bug, and you were supposed to either have a 0 or a -1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or a +1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you're supposed to set it up when you were building it so that you had no backlash whatsoever. If you have a lash between those gears so that they got space, the fact that that camshaft is hard and easy is going to make a rattling noise that just drive you up the wall. It's horrible. So there's something they got to do with that. Timing chains don't typically give that trouble. So the timing belts, they take care of all the noise problems. And the cool thing about having a timing belt instead of a timing chain, it needs to be swimming in oil. Splash oil and all that. It's got to be sealed, right? A timing belt, you just stick a shaft out the edge of the head with a seal around it and let the timing belt spin in a plastic cover. You don't have to seal nothing. Is that cool or what? Just think about what it is. Okay, so that was the second part of that. So timing chains have got to be lubricated. So the rubber timing belt, like I said, is just has the shafts just stick out through the end of the block, and you got some tensioners and stuff in there. Now let's see, let me make sure I don't leave anything out here. I got this email a few months back. This guy says, my wife and I were driving to Florida from North Carolina when our 2004 Kia Rio broke down. The timing belt broke, and subsequently the entire engine needs to be replaced. We still owe $7,000 on the car, and the question for me was, would you advise sinking another $3,000 into a Kia that has 90,000 miles on it? They were supposed to have already changed that timing belt, but it cost them. See, they still owed money on it, and they had jump time destroyed the engine. Like I was talking about, it snaps the heads off the valve. We've seen them come in here like that when we had to put an engine on it. The timing belt on that car calls for timing belt replacement at $60,000. They had gone 30,000 miles past that. Okay, be taking notes now because you're getting graded on your notes. All right, it's interesting to me that we had recently done an engine replacement in the shop for the same reason on a 2001 Kia, but we managed to get an engine for like $1,200 from the junkyard, Okay, the first thing that I like to tell customers is that, like I said earlier, they need to decide when the timing belt's replaced instead of letting the timing belt decide. The timing belt is never going to pick a good time to decide when to be replaced. And they got no idea when that might happen. Now, I had a Toyota Camry that I worked on for a friend of mine, his wife's car, and they were complaining about how it didn't quite work right and all that. It didn't quite run right. And so what we did was we went to, I drove the car to Dothan and wrote a ticket up on it at the Ford place where I was working and pulled it in there. And it was surging and cutting out and all that. But the timing belt had jumped and it was 3 teeth out of time. But why it didn't go ahead and just strip on out, I don't know. But it had just jumped 3 teeth. Something else that can happen, and pay attention to this when you're putting a timing belt on while I'm thinking about it, because if I don't tell you this, I'll forget it. If you have any trash or anything from whatever, old gaskets or anything like that, and it happens to fall down inside that cover so that it can ride that belt, if it rides that belt down and it's stiff enough and it goes under that crank pulley, it will actually cause those gears to come out of place and it'll jump time. See what I mean? You get where I'm going here? If you got any piece of trash, you make sure you blow everything out of that cover. Don't leave anything in that cover that can go down on that belt and cause it to jump time. That'll cause you a comeback. If one's a valve bender, you might want, if you do something like that and it jumps time after you've put a timing belt on it. Let's say somebody wants their timing belt changed, and while they're there, you're going to put a water pump on it too. And you scrape the gasket and you change the water pump because it's in there pulled by the timing belt. And let's say that you don't clean your gasket material out good, and a piece of that rides down that timing belt, goes around that crank, and it boom, 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 jumps several teeth. Now they're coming in here with low engine vacuum, a surge, oxygen sensor codes and all this. So you go back and you say, well, we got low engine vacuum, we must have something going on all the time. And you look, and we've had that happen here before. Did it right, running great, goes to town, comes back, surging, cutting up, check engine lights on. It's out of time like this much. And it was in time when it left, but something got down in there. So always make sure it's clean down in there. But that's pretty good. Well, it was interesting to me, too, how many people never even think about their timing belt. And that's where I was going with that. Line the timing marks up when you're changing a belt before you remove the belt. If you're going to change a belt that hasn't jumped time, line your timing marks up before you remove the belt. That's a smart way to do it. Saves you a lot of trouble, saves you a lot of time. There are some people that I know of, and this is a foolhardy way to do this, that they will just try to hold the gears and everything still. They'll pull the timing belt off without lining any marks up whatsoever, and they'll say, well, if none of the shafts have moved, I can just put the timing belt back on there and it'll be okay. But you can get away with that a time or two, but sooner or later you're going to get bit. It's better to find your schematic or how your marks are supposed to look in your shop manual material. Line those suckers up and make sure it's perfect. After you put a timing belt on, you're supposed to turn it through 2 times. And a lot of times, you've got a spring-loaded tensioner usually. And when you put that timing belt on there, all of the slack with your marks lined up, all of the slack that's in that belt that the tensioner is going to take up needs to be on the tensioner side of the belt. You got me? Because if it's not, if it's slack on the other side, when you tighten it up, it will turn the gears and get it out of time.
Where's your tools at for them lines?
Oh, the lines, my desk drawer has some. You'll probably find some in there. I've got a kit for that too. But anyway, give me a minute. This ain't gonna take me long, and I'll be right out there. All right. Anyway, but if the belt hadn't jumped, line it up. So ignore the crankshaft mark. Now listen to this. This is important too. If you're going to see if one's jump time, don't pay any attention to the crankshaft mark until you've lined up the camshaft mark. Now some timing covers will have a little rubber stopper that you can pop out that makes the cam timing mark visible. That's nice when they do that. You know what I mean? Pop that out and just turn the engine over. Well, if you turn the engine over and the camshaft is not moving, like if it's a no start, then you got a jump timing belt. That's just it. If I'm turning the crankshaft and the camshaft is just sitting there, now sometimes it'll be like on that Toyota, it'll still move. All right, so you turn it over and you line that timing mark up. Whatever you have to do to make access for that timing mark later, line that timing mark up on your camshaft, and the crank mark should be lined up. The crank mark lines up twice for every one time the cam mark lines up. So if you line up the crank mark, your camshaft could be 180 out. You understand what I'm saying? But every single time that you line that camshaft mark up, that crank mark should be lined up, if it's right. If you line that camshaft mark up perfectly and that crank mark is several teeth off, you got problems. So when you line it up, Line up your, I mean, like whenever you're lining up before you change the belt, line up the cam mark and the crankshaft. You know, look at it before you get in there. That's the whole point. Okay, avoid turning the engine backwards. Always move it in the direction that it normally runs. And recognize the fact that on front wheel drive cars, the engine mount on the belt end of the engine will need to be removed. On the timing belt end of the engine, there's an engine mount. Usually you got to pull that off on most of them. And the balancer is going to need to come off. Some of them you have to have a puller to pull the balancer off. Some of them you can just pull the balancer off by hand. Here's another important, extremely important thing. Always torque that balancer back on there to spec. Don't just tighten the balancer as good as you can with a wrench and feel like it'd be aight, because a lot of times it won't. It can wallow that gear out, I mean that keyway out, and make a mess out of it. Now Chryslers and stuff don't have that. You know, don't have the Chrysler, most of the late model Chrysler stuff is just an interference fit, and it's got no keyway or timing marks or anything on that pulley. Okay, now then, the harmonic balancer is going to have to be removed. So you don't, I've actually seen some of them where they use, where they've left that loose, and it's like I've talked about this before. That little pulse wheel on the front of that engine, if that balancer happens to get out of index with where it's supposed to be on the crankshaft, you'll have a no start situation or a really low power situation. So be really careful about that. And it can only do that if you've got one of them balancers you pull off with your fingers and you don't tighten the balancer bolts enough, because that balancer's got some weight to it, and it'll start wallowing that key out, cause a problem. Always tighten it up like you should. Put all the plastic covers back in place and keep the trash out of it. On the PT Cruiser, that we did a PT Cruiser in here, you actually have to pull the right hand shock absorber out and get it and raise the engine and lower it several times to get that time going. You know how much labor time it is to change the timing belt on a PT Cruiser? 8 hours is an all-day job.
It's kind of silly.
Yeah, but it takes about that much time too. It's a bear. But anyway, that's how you're going to keep up with that. All right. Now, you need to know something else. You need to know before you start on a timing belt job. When you determine the timing belt's jump, you need to know if it's an interference engine or not. The way I always do that, if I'm not sure, is I look in the shop manual, and when you're looking at the procedure for putting the timing belt on, if it tells you to be careful about turning the engine with the timing belt off because you might damage valves, you can pretty well feel like it's an interference engine. Well, like say your Toyota, your Ford Escorts and all these, they don't bend the valves. Now the Ford Escorts with the 1.8, which is a little hot rod dual red cam, it will bend valves, but that motor is built by Mazda or somebody. All right. Anyway, that's pretty much all I got right there. And I'm going to show you a picture right here. Let me fire up my media projector, if I can get it to turn on. And I'm going to move this board so you can see it. See the board, one of the boards, I can see we're just about done here. This is a real short session. We're going to have short sessions here on special topics, but I'm going to cover one of these, like I say, your notes. I'm not going to just keep you in here for the sake of keeping you in here, you know. All right, now then, see if I can loosen that and turn it around so you can see that. All right, you see them pictures right there? All right, I got to line that up. All right, turn this off so we can see better. Now, this right here on that Toyota engine is the tensioner. You notice that tensioner is a little difficult to see there, but there's a slot there. I can zoom in on these pictures, and I think it's probably what I need to do. The cool thing about a PDF file is you can zoom in. And I can go a picture at a time. See that? I can make that happen. Let me start with that. There's your little, see that little slotted part right there? That tensioner, believe it or not, is spring loaded. All right, you see that hole? Can you see that hole in that gear? This is the Toyota Camry, and that E model out there. That Toyota Camry has got a little notch right behind that on the very top. Now over here, about at this point right here, there's a little round punch mark. It looks like where you would want to line that hole up with. They will perfectly line up with. That's not the right place. Not on the later model engines. Although I worked on one time that I could have sworn I built it that way, but the ones that I've seen all since then have to line up with that one right there. All right, down here on the bottom, you're going to have some marks too. You're going to mark it's got to line up down there on the bottom. And this right here, what is this right here? Anybody know? What does that do? That's a cog-driven pulley. You know when it spins? Remember this, I'm going to tell you, don't ever forget it, that's the oil pump. Alright, you know what this is, right?
Water pump.
Water pump's driven by that pulley, the oil pump's driven by that one. This right here's got a funky O-ring behind it, a big O-ring, it's shaped like the cover that can leak. Alright. A lot of times what we'll see that fails on these is these pulleys, that little pulley right there, or that pulley right there, the bearings will go out in them. So whenever you're pulling, this is important, I'm telling you this for a reason. Whenever you pull a timing belt off, spin every dadgum pulley and see if any of them are noisy. Right? If you tighten the timing belt too much on the ones that have, they've got square teeth timing belts and round teeth timing belts. If you tighten the timing belt too much, you may get a noise that sounds like and you say, oh, what in the world is that? Well, if you loosen the timing belt just a little, it doesn't do that. If you ask me why it makes that noise, I'm going to say, I don't know. Except I do know that if it's too tight, you're going to have a noisy timing belt. And as I remember, it's the ones with the curve, with the round teeth that do that. I could be backwards on that. But one of the square teeth and the round teeth, some of these teeth right here will have a round versus a square configuration to them. In other words, they'll have the square one doesn't do it, the round one does or something. Okay, now, that's the configuration of that belt, and it's really cool. Now, this is a dual overhead cam engine, but the other camshaft is driven by a gear under the valve cover, and the other camshaft spins in the opposite direction because it's, you know, got that one gear. Okay. Now, this right here, see that little spring? Well, that Toyota, that little spring right there is actually supposed to pull that tensioner up. But in order to get your timing belt off, you're actually going to pry this against its spring and stretch that spring and tighten that bolt so this will stay up out of the way. And then you work your timing belt off. Of course, your balancer on the Toyota Camry will just pull off with your fingers. Occasionally, you have a balancer bolt that'll be really hard to come off. All right. And see what I did on this one here, in order to make that happen, is I pushed down on this with a screwdriver, just push on that little thing, and then I tighten this bolt, and that makes this timing belt loose enough where you can just very easily take it off. That's the right way to do that. Incidentally, I took all these pictures, so, and that's what it looks like when the spring is stretched and the belt is loose, you see. All right, that's number 4. Okay, number 5. Let me go back up here so you can get all of that. This is where you're going to feel of all of it. You're going to feel of your water pump. And you're going to see if it rattles around, or if when you spin it, it goes, you know, if we got noisy bearings. It's a silly thing to put a timing belt on without checking this stuff. And I'm telling you, you need to spin this one, you need to spin that one, you need to spin this one. The oil pump is not too much, it's not a problem. All right? Make sure you do that. Okay? Now, on the crank pulley, down there, you see them funky little teeth on the back of that? These little teeth here? Alright, if you want to cause yourself a real pain, just handle this gear roughly and break one of those teeth off. And when you put it back together, it won't start for nothing. Or if it does start, it ain't going to run right. Or it may start sometimes and not other times. It does all kinds of crazy stuff. Because that tooth right there, these teeth are extremely important. They're about 10 degrees apart. And I've known of people breaking those teeth off and having trouble calling for the calf root. Alright? And that's pretty much it. You know, when you put it back together, you're going to do it the same way, you know, that you took it off. Feed it on there, make sure your marks are lined up, and then you're done. Anybody got any questions about that?